So, I don't know about you, but have you ever done something you later regretted? Or maybe not done something that later you're like, man, I really wished I'd done that. Like, just some random examples, nothing personal, like skinny dipping in a hotel, speeding, saying too much, like maybe I just did, saying too little, not buying that house you should have, buying a boat instead, buying a motorbike, buying a puppy. How's that going, Mike? Wise? I don't know. He's still yet to find out if that's a wise decision or not. Shaving your head in year 11 when you're at your most vulnerable. I don't know. That seems unwise. I don't know why anyone would do that. Not doing the dishes when you've been asked to. Running late for important things you promised you'd be there for. Just to give just a couple of random examples I could think of. Now, you might be shocked to hear this. And it's okay. And if you refuse to blatantly believe me, that's okay. But I am a flawed human. And some of those aforementioned examples I may have committed in my own life. And I guess that was a bit of a challenge for me. Even standing here talking about this idea of wisdom does feel a little bit tough because I actually don't think I'm the guru. I'm not the one, the sage. I'm not putting my hand up here saying, follow my ways. But actually, I'm here to share some ideas from the Bible and from Jesus. And I think Jesus is someone worth following, someone with great wisdom to share with us. And we have this God, this wise God who actually seeks relationship with us and wants the best for us. So I think I've got some ideas to share, not that they're my own, but from this good, gracious God that we have. And I was privileged to share some of those stories and some more in-depth, unwise decisions from my youth with our at camp. And I explained to them why I still walk with a slight limp still today. So I've got a key verse. It will come up on the screen. This is one that we're going to keep referring to today. It comes from Ephesians 5, verse 15. It says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of your time because the days are evil." And I want to draw out a few points from this verse, if we can just leave it there. The first thing I see from this is wisdom is this being very careful. Be very careful, be intentional, considerate. I think that's the call of wisdom. In some ways, it's really simple. Stop, consider, think about it. It's this diligent approach to the way you live, a thoughtful way of living. How you live, or in the original Greek, it's walk. And I think that's an invitation saying this applies to everything. Wisdom should flow through our lives in everything we do. So be careful about everything you do. Not as the unwise, but as the wise. So here this contrast is saying the unwise, on the other hand, would be careless living, not being thoughtful, not thinking about it, but actually going through life without a thought. And that's the invitation of wisdom, is to stop and think and be intentional. Why? Because it says the days are evil. And I think that's saying the culture around us is full of distraction, things to steal our attention, our focus away from God and the things that He wants for us. And we've got to be careful to live deliberately, or we so easily lose the point. We get distracted. So we have that contrast. Wisdom versus foolishness. Later on in this passage in Ephesians, 2 verses later, it talks about another contrast. It says in verse 17, "Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." So here I see this correlation between wisdom and God's will, knowing God's will, which got me thinking. So how would I explain that simply to someone? What is God's will for us as people? And I jump back to a verse in Proverbs. "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." A bit of a scary looking verse unless you really think about it. Because I think scholars emphasize that this fear isn't this terror. We're not meant to walk through life terrorized by God in fear. I think that's the whole idea of the communion table, is God's inviting us into relationship. But it's a fear that's this reverence, this awe of God and who God is. It's acknowledging God's sovereignty, God's holiness, God's righteousness, God's rule over the earth. And that's where wisdom begins, with that acknowledgement of who God is. And I think also with that, if we're acknowledging God as our creator and our designer, then the flow on from that is thinking that actually God knows us the best and actually wants the best for us if we are his creation. So we need to explore this more. So I think I've got the next one there. Wisdom, God's will, recognition of God's authority. So that's the beginning of wisdom. Wisdom is God's will, or knowing God's will, or living in God's will, and it begins with recognition of God's authority. And I think playing with that idea of that God knows us the best and wants the best for us, I thought of this verse in John 10, verse 10, and it says, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. Life abundantly. Not just a regular, dull, boring life, but an overflowing life, a good life. And this verse comes out of what's called the Jesus' Good Shepherd discourse, where he talks about, I'm the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And in there, part of Jesus wanting the best life for us is actually an invitation to be part of his fold. He invites us under his guidance, his nurturing, his protection. That's part of this wisdom, part of recognizing who God is and then coming in line with his way of living. So that's the next layer of the Neapolitan ice cream that I'm forming here. Yeah, I do love ice cream. All right, and I've got the strawberry to come. You're welcome, Youthies. All right. So this verse from Ephesians comes out of a bigger passage, and I want to jump back to where it starts. In Ephesians 5, verse 1 and 2, it says, therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children and walk in love, as Christ loved us and gave himself for us, a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God. Later in that passage, it also talks in verse 8 about walking as children of the light. Remember, walk again is living as children of the light. So walking or living in love, walking and living in light. This invitation to be imitators of Christ, to live lives overflowing with love. Okay, so yes, there's our ice cream. So wisdom is knowing God's will and living in God's will. It starts with recognition of who God is, his authority, and coming under that, knowing that God knows us the best and wants the best for us, and then living lives of love like he's called us to, like he's done for us, to mirror Christ in our lives. And I feel like that very quickly seems like that's the best thing for us, but actually for the whole world around us, if we live lives like that. So, to summarize, wisdom is rooted in relationship with God and the outworking of love. Now, I want to jump to a practical. How do we apply this to our lives? How are we going to be careful, intentional, wise people? And this was a big focus of our youth camp and something we talked about a lot. We actually based it in a question. And Darcy's already given it away, but youthies, can you say it together? Do you remember it? Considering our past experiences. Oh, I put it on the screen. Come on, Ryan, help him out. Ryan's like, this is going badly, Greg. I'll help you out. Considering our past experiences, our current circumstances, and our future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? So yes, asking that question, what is the wise thing to do? But Andy Stanley suggests this framework. He suggests really intentionally reflecting on these three specific things. And I want to do those with you now. My past experiences. See, wisdom stops and considers the past because it's an invitation of all our experiences to learn, to grow, to change. We have a God of redemption, of grace, of forgiveness, which is great news. So I think you can look back at your mistakes and failures and not see them with shame and guilt, but actually there's hope in them. God can redeem them. But also you can look back at your successes, what's gone well for you, and you can use those to actually really help map your path forward wisely. Remember, wisdom is being intentional. It's considering things. In light of my past, what are the wise things for me to do? Now, on youth camp, I told a story about an unwise thing I did as a youthie growing up in Toowoomba. I was standing at the top of a hill called the Great Dividing Range, if you've ever been there. And I used to love mountain biking. I still remember the moment. There's a big dirt road down in front of me, quite steep. I'm on my mountain bike, and at the bottom are my friends looking at me nervously but cheering me on, and a pile of about 5 dirt mounds. The council had left them there to repair the road, but we decided to shape them and craft them into a jump. And it seemed like a great idea at the time. Well, I don't even think it did, actually. I still remember how nervous I was, thinking, why are we doing this? Anyway, I went for it and landed very badly, crashed off to the side of the ramp and actually ended up getting a knee reconstruction. So I shared that with the youthies, and we're all, yeah, that was a bad decision to do, Greg. But you know what? I wish I'd known this question, because something I didn't tell the youthies that day is, it's probably 3 years later. I'm on top of Whistler Mountain in Canada. I'm staring down a very steep, very large mountain at some piles of snow. And I didn't stop and think, I feel like I've been here before. This feels like deja vu. No. This was towards the end of the season. I was pretty good at snowboarding. And this was only the small park. I'd actually ridden in some of the bigger jumps in the park, so I came down. And it ends up I came down with quite a bit too much speed. And I hit the up ramp, and I'm sailing through the air. And here's the down ramp. But the sad thing is I'm still going up. And I continue going up for several more meters. And I'm getting higher because the ground's falling away, and I land. And believe it or not, who would have thought? I blew out my knee again. So yes, thank you. And that's part of my limp today. It's endearing. I have weak knees, but Sarah loves them, so I'm grateful for that. She has poor eyesight too, but that's all right. And I'm very hairy man. I leave the hair. Makes them look bigger. Anyway, too much detail. That wasn't in my notes. All right, where am I? No, I think the invitation of that story, yes, you can apply it to risk-taking, but actually the invitation to look back and learn is throughout all our lives, in our relationships, I think, more than anything. What are the relationships, experiences you've had in the past growing up? How can you learn from those? How can you consider those and be intentional and be wise about how's that going to shape me going forward? And remember, we keep linking it back to God and God's will for us. God knows us. God wants us to live lives of love. So through that, while I reflect on my past, how am I going to learn from that? How am I going to become more loving, more kind, more compassionate, more like Christ? How am I growing like Christ each day? What can I learn from my past experiences? That's the first part of Andy Stanley's question. Secondly, he invites us to consider our current circumstances. And I think this is a growing need today, is this self-awareness about ourselves and our identity of who we are in Christ. And I think a big part of our current circumstances is acknowledging we're emotional humans. And there's actually a place for all our emotions. They're actually an incredible part of how God's created and designed us. I have this fantastic opportunity at the moment where I work here with my favourite boss, but also in a school as a counsellor. And I'd say a lot of the time I spend at this school working with kids is on this very thing. It's about actually learning that your emotions are a gift to you, but you actually need to regulate them and not react in moments just because you're feeling angry or frustrated. But actually you need to be self-aware to know, hey, I need some time and space here and now. What are some things I can do? And I think that's great. And it's so, I love working with kids and helping with this, and it's so powerful. And I hope they learn from it, because it gets pretty embarrassing as an adult when you can't regulate your emotions and you're letting anger speak out. And we see it all the time, especially driving cars. It seems to bring out this other side of people, this dark side. But we don't want to be like that. Remember, we want to keep going back to my identity is in Christ. What's God's will for my life? What's wise is that I align with that. I overflow with love. I'm intentional and reflective. So in the moment, how am I being self-aware of my emotions and how they're controlling how I present to the world? I know I'm guilty, and I shared this with youth. I lost a friendship because I reacted in a moment where I was angry and frustrated with someone else. I definitely didn't speak out of love and kindness, and I lost a whole friendship. I know years later I went back and repented and tried to make it right, but couldn't be recovered. So what's wise in the moment? Wisdom is considering what are my emotions and how's that impacting how I'm coming across. I love the verse from Proverbs 17:28. I wish little Greg had known this one too. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Little Greg. So cute. If only he'd been wiser and been a bit more shh. All right. Future hopes and dreams. This is the third part of Andy Stanley's invitation to wisdom. We consider our past, our current circumstances, and our future hopes and dreams. And I loved how Darcy framed that about who I want to become. Who am I wanting to become? Again, wisdom, remember, is this intentional consideration. How often do we stop and think about, who am I wanting to become? And I think that's the story of Christianity. I'm so glad it's not an end zone, it's a journey. It's a walk with Christ as we become more like him. So again, this invitation of wisdom is stop. Think about it, consider it. Otherwise, you're going to look back in regret at that things haven't changed, haven't shifted. Or, again, you're making the same mistakes you have in the past. I recently crossed over to my 40s. Thank you, Jono, for that brutal comparison. And I've been warned by many of my friends about the slippery slope of midlife, especially the 40s. Now, you all look fantastic, by the way. However, many of my friends have commented, yeah, I used to be able to eat whatever I liked too, Greg, like ice cream and things. Or I used to be quite athletic, they'd say to me, and they'd be flexing a little bit. And quite firm. But all of a sudden, and I know I've spoken about this a lot, but like any person who exercises, why do you really do it? Firstly, to tell other people about it, right? Let's be clear. I don't want to pretend. I cycle because I like to tell people I cycle, okay? And that's why I'm here again. I've got the microphone. I cycle, big time. But secondly, given my bad knee and an awareness from my friends about a slowing metabolism and the realism of that, it's actually a really deliberate decision about who do I want to become. I want to stay active for my kids, for my grandkids. I want to be mobile and healthy and fit and strong. So I'm making a decision now about becoming a better cyclist. So what are you doing now? I think the invitation here is pause and consider. Because I think our time is our most precious commodity. I think I've got a slide to go with this one, Ryan. And the invitation here, it says, use your time wisely because the days are evil. And I think the invitation here, using your time wisely, is the most valuable things in life accumulate over time. They grow over time. Relationships, finances, all these important things take time. Health, strength, okay? You can't build a relationship with someone. I can't, go overseas for all year and then come home and be like, Sarah, I'm going to take you we're going to just eat dinner all night tonight. We're going to have 8-hour romantic dinner. I'm going to have 100 candles. It's an investment over time. I can't just go to the gym and just be like, I'm going to work out for like 24 hours straight and suddenly that's going to transform me. No, it's accumulation over time of small investments that accumulate and build and grow. I think in our faith life, again, it's the invitation to walk with Christ each day, to slowly accumulate a relationship with God, and we grow over time. It's not, again, you can't just do a prayer vigil for a day and then suddenly, not that God isn't a God of miracles and can't do things, but I think that's the invitation, is actually consistency, dedication to it. I'm really excited about our next upcoming series. I think end of July, is it, or August, as we look at Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer and the spiritual practices that we need to bring into our lives to wisely accumulate and work towards that goal of being more loving, more compassionate, more kind, more like Christ. I was reflecting on relationships in particular, and I was thinking about one of the wisest decisions I think I've made and Sarah and I have made as a family. And I think it's based on this verse from Proverbs. It says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm." Now, I actually think that was, do you remember when we did the key tag sermon series? It was definitely one of those, am I right? Definitely. I was like, I know this verse so well, and I think it's back when we used to every week do a memory verse as a church. And it was one of those. And yeah, for me, I'm saying this is a wise decision because early on we decided to get our family rooted in this community, committed to it. We came along, I know I've told this many times, I still remember 17 years ago coming down that little hallway into this stadium and being greeted. Sarah was pregnant with our son, and we were looking for a community because we saw the value in that we needed support. We couldn't do this journey of life by ourselves, and I'm so grateful for that decision we made then. We probably didn't even see or realize the benefits for us today. If we'd been wise to pause and think about it, we'd have been like, good job, well done, little Greg. Great decision. But I've had this privilege, and especially now that I work here, I get this awesome privilege to work alongside Mike, Stephen and Ruth and Emma Bell, and so many others who I'm the beneficiary of walking alongside them, doing life with them. I encourage you, if it's not this community, our community, but I think this one's fantastic. There's so much depth and richness of experience and knowledge and wisdom in this room to push into it, to get involved, get engaged in this community, become part of it, and walk alongside other people. But as I thought more about this verse, I actually think there's another, maybe a more confronting way to look at it. And it's if we flip this verse. Am I someone that others should walk beside? Am I actually someone that others would be like, hey, I'm going to do life with Greg? And when I thought about that, I was like, wow, that's a great question. Because I could very quickly look at this community and think, yeah, I'm so glad I'm friends with these people. I'm walking beside them. I wonder if they feel the same about me. Am I someone that people want to follow? Am I someone that others would see as wise, that they're going to benefit from walking and doing life beside me? Are they going to grow? Are they going to experience Christ's love through their interactions with me, by doing life with me? Are they going to see that I point them towards God and acknowledge his sovereignty? Am I going to share that God's way of living is the best for us in the way that I live? I want to finish by reading that verse with you again. And I want you just to contemplate it as I read it. Ephesians 5, verse 15. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of your time because the days are evil.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have a spare moment and want to stay up to date, it would mean a lot if you could follow us on social media or even subscribe to our YouTube channel. It all helps in getting the good news out there. Peace.